Okay, now it's time for me to step into the demo cam. And what I thought I would do today is kind of take last week's demo where I showed you how to use the tri-bead roller and just go that next step. So now I'm going to demonstrate just one really cool effect that you can get on polymer clay beads. And before I do that though, what I would like to know is how many of you have never used polymer clay before? If you would raise your hand and click your little raise hand over in the corner. I'm just curious how many have never used polymer clay, or how many of you have never worked and made jewelry? Okay, we've got a few of them. That's great. So I think this is something that you will really like because as I mentioned last week, it doesn't really take a beautiful bead, one bead, to make a beautiful necklace or bracelet. It's the combination of the different beads that really make the design. So let me show you. I'm going to put up a sample of this bracelet that I made a couple years ago. It has a lot of different beads, as you can see, on it. And it's really a conglomeration of what was left over after I had finished making all of my projects for the book. So a couple of things we're going to be using today. We're going to be using embossing powders. So if you're a paper crafter, I'm sure you have some embossing powders. The nice thing I like about the Tim Holtz's distressing powder is that they have they're kind of an intermix of colors. So it's not just one flat color. So let's see, I've got, looks like old paper. That's one of my favorites. And I have broken china. This one is not Tim's, but it is a Ranger, and it's called Queen's Gold. So, but you can use any color combination that you like. The other thing that we're going to use is polymer clay. And I'm just going to be working in black. Now, if you use the tri-bead roller that I showed last week, and you use just one black 2-ounce bar of clay, you're going to get about 50 beads out of it. So this is really a pretty cost-effective project. Mine's under plastic because I have already conditioned it, which means that it's nice and soft, it's ready to go. And all you're going to do, you can either use the tri-bead roller, or you can use your fingers to pinch off a piece and just make a round ball, or any shape bead that you want. This is a really simple technique. So to make a ball, just put it in your palm, roll it around, and you have a ball. Pretty simple. Now take your finger, open up your distress powder, and this does not take a whole lot of product at all, but you're just going to daub pretty randomly the powder right onto your bead. All right. You can cover the whole bead, or you can just cover bits and pieces of it. So there's one color. Let me put the lid on so I don't mess that up. And, oh dear, I can't find it. There it is. Here's the second color. So I have areas that are covered a lot, and I have areas that are hardly covered at all. And then I'm going to come back in. This gold is pretty, it's pretty saturated. So I'm just going to add a few speckles here and there with the gold. Okay, not a whole lot. Okay. So here's what the bead looks like. Get that lid on before I dump everything. I'll put that up to the camera. There we go. You can get a good idea that some of the black is showing through, and then over here there's a lot more powder. Okay, so it's really pretty right now, but the powder will not stick unless the bead is baked. So just for the sake of time, what I'm going to show you is how I'm just going to set the embossing powder with my heat gun. You would normally put your hole through your bead and then put it into the oven, either on a bead baking rack or suspended over a drinking glass, and let your bead bake that way. And you're going to bake that according to the manufacturer's instructions that are on the package. But I want to show you quick results. So I'm going to take my heat gun and I'm going to heat just enough to melt the embossing powder so you can see what it looks like. And this is where the distress powders really make a beautiful effect, because they're not just one color mixed in. And we're really not using them like you would in scrapbooks or in paper crafts, in card making. When the beads come out of the oven, the embossing powder is pretty sticky, so make sure you don't touch your bead. Let me get that. Okay. So at this point, my bead is not completely baked. This would definitely have to go back in. But look at how bright and shiny it got. Isn't that pretty? Okay. Here's one that I did earlier. I put a lot more embossing powder. Come on, camera. There we go. I put a lot more embossing powder and covered a lot more of the surface of the bead, so you can see. And yes, to answer your questions, let me put that picture back up again so you can look at all the different, no, I take that back. I wanted to show you one other thing. I'll answer your questions about the bead and about this particular project, but I wanted to show you some other really cool and really simple effects that you can get just by mixing clay. This is translucent clay that I've mixed with a lime green clay, and you see those specks in there? That's actually herbs and pepper. So it makes a really cool effect. Okay. This here, I think you can kind of see the texture there. This is just purple. There's a good. And I just texturized it, and after it was baked, then I antiqued it. This, of course, is one of the turquoise beads. Here's a bead that I crackled paint. And all of these different techniques are in my bead technique book. Here's another one that is antiqued. So nothing really hard about any of these beads, but when you put them together, it really does make for a really, really fun necklace. And I'm going to put that bracelet back up while I readjust my camera again. I know, Heidi, you had a question about the baking. I think I saw that real quick. The chat room was kind of going fast. I was trying to keep an eye on it. I only used the heat gun just to show you folks what it would look like when they come out of the oven. What I would recommend that you do is actually bake your beads in the oven for the recommended time based on the brand of clay that you're using. I use Stimo Soft, so it bakes anywhere from 265, which is the older formulation, to the newer formulation bakes at 230. And I usually bake my beads around 30 minutes. Sometimes I bake them closer to an hour, but I bake them suspended. And anyway, that's about baking. How do I seal them? Several ways to seal them. You can do the quick method just by putting an acrylic sealer over the top of them. Or in my classes, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my classes tomorrow. I have a basic millefiori class. We're going to be doing jelly rolls, bullseye canes, and you might think, okay, that's really, really basic, but I can tell you that these make some beautiful beads. When we come back and we wrap up, I'm going to show you some of the beads that you can make with just these very, very simple caning techniques, and you make them very, very pretty. I have some finishing techniques that don't use any kind of sealer, but it does bring them to a high gloss, and that's one of the things you'll learn in class. But if you want to do it the quick way, sometimes I do it that way, you can use, any kind of acrylic sealer. What does the translucent do? The translucent in the clay lets you see through it. So it lets you see into depths of the clay, and that's how you were able to see that pepper coming through and how you could see those little specks. Any other questions? I do recommend sanding. If you really want a professional look to your beads, I absolutely do recommend sanding. And I am, sorry about that, I'm adjusting my camera and putting it back so I can read my notes again. But yes, I absolutely recommend sanding. That's how you're going to get the highest shine. And then there's a couple different extra techniques that I can show you that'll bring out a satin finish, because some things you just want to look really soft shine, and there's other things that you want to have a really high shine. So you do the embossing before baking. I do all of my embossing and put all those embossing powders on before they're baked. That was a raw piece of clay that I just made from a sheet of black clay.